The clang of the bolt echoed like the final nail in a coffin. The steel door, layered with chipped paint, green over gray over a filthy blue, groaned as it swung open. Two men stepped inside. The first one stumbled in. A young guy, maybe 20, scared eyes, busted lip. A first-timer. The guard gave him a shove between the shoulder blades to keep him moving. Then came the second one, calm, tall, solid, Sergei Gavrilov. 32 years old, 6'2", convicted of second-degree murder, 15 years in a maximum security facility. He crossed the threshold of the intake cell and froze, letting his eyes adjust to the yellow glow of a single-cage bulb under the cracked ceiling. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of unwashed bodies, sour sweat, cheap tobacco, and the faint but ever-present stench of the bucket in the corner, a rusty metal pail half covered with a rag. The cell was meant for 10 men, but at least 20 were packed inside. Some sat, some lay down, some just stood there shoulder to shoulder, pressed against the bunks like cattle. When Gavrilov entered, all talk stopped. 20 pairs of eyes locked on him, studying, weighing, dissecting. The first test, the silent initiation. A voice broke the quiet, rough and hoarse, coming from the top bunk near the window. "Hey, fresh meat, come here, let's talk." Gavrilov looked up. A thick-necked man in his 40s sat there, one leg over the other, a heavy jaw, small eyes sunk deep into his skull. Blue spiderweb tattoo on his neck, rings inked across his fingers. He wasn't a full-blown shot caller, but he was the boss here, the cell's overseer. Gavrilov didn't move. He just let his eyes wander across the cell. Near the bucket sat 3 men, hunched over, defeated, eyes down, the outcasts. The rest, hustlers, cons, old-timers, scattered around in tight cliques, every spot speaking of rank. The closer to the window, the higher you were. The closer to the bucket, the lower. The voice barked again. "You deaf or what? I said come here." "I hear you," Gavrilov said evenly, his tone calm, no fear, no tremble. "Then move your ass, or your legs don't work." He took 3 slow steps forward and stopped dead center in the room. Not too close, not too far. It was a message: I don't bow, but I don't provoke either. "Who are you on the outside?" came the standard question. "Drifter," Gavrilov said. That one word said enough. Not a civilian, not a wannabe, not a thief either. Just a man who lived by the code, on the road, no boss, no master. The man on the bunk, they called him Spider, smirked. "Drifter, huh? Ballsy. And what's your rank then?" He glanced at Gavrilov's hands, looking for tattoos. There were none, just scars across his knuckles. "Judge me by my deeds," Gavrilov said calmly. "They're coming." Spider's eyes narrowed. Bold answer, but the right one. Words didn't make a man. Actions did. This newcomer wasn't green. "What's your charge?" Spider asked. 105, murder, 15 years. A quiet murmur rippled through the cell. Murder. That meant respect, especially if it wasn't some drunken brawl. Spider nodded to his sidekick, a twitchy, rat-faced man nicknamed Fuse. The guy got up, pulled a matchbox from under his mattress, lit a cigarette, and, accidentally, dropped the box to the floor, right beside the bucket. The room went dead silent. A setup, a test. Anything that touched the floor near the bucket was dirty. Pick it up, and you're dirty too. Refuse, and you're defying the boss. A no-win situation. The young kid who came in with Gavrilov shrank against the wall, already terrified. "Hey, Drifter," Spider drawled. "Be a pal. Pick that up for me. Old man's too tired to bend." Gavrilov didn't even look at the matchbox. His eyes stayed on Spider. "No?" Spider's voice turned colder. "And why not? Too proud?" "Not proud," Gavrilov said. "Just not touching trash that rolled by the shitter." Spider smiled, but there was no humor in it. "So you're a man of principle, huh? You live by the code?" He stood up slowly, every move an unspoken threat. "Or maybe you're a plant, a cop's puppet trying to act tough." The air grew heavier. 2 of Spider's guys rose to their feet behind him. "Man to man," Gavrilov said. "You asked me to break the code so you can test me later. Why the circus?" Spider's face twisted. "You calling me a clown, punk?" He took a step forward, and that's when it happened. He swung, Big, heavy, aimed straight for Gavrilov's jaw. But Gavrilov didn't flinch. He stepped into the punch, ducked under, and drove the base of his palm into Spider's chin. At the same moment, his knee came up hard into the man's groin. A crunch, a muffled, wet grunt. Spider's body folded. Before he could drop, Gavrilov grabbed him by the collar, twisted, and hurled him into one of his goons. Both crashed down. The second one, Fuse, pulled a shiv, a sharpened handle from a spoon. Too late. Gavrilov caught his wrist, twisted, crack, bones snapped. The shiv hit the floor. Fuse screamed, clutching his hand. It was over in 5 seconds. Gavrilov stood in the middle of the cell, breathing heavy. Spider lay on the floor, coughing blood. Fuse whimpered in the corner. No one else moved. Gavrilov walked to Spider's bunk, picked up his mug, poured some water from the barrel, and handed it to an old man sitting nearby. The old man, dry as parchment, face cut with wrinkles, faded tattoos of church domes across his chest, took it in silence. "Here, old man," Gavrilov said. "Thanks, son," the old man whispered. "You hit him hard. That's Spider. He works under the shot caller. Greek runs the yard. Now he'll call you in. He'll want answers." "Let him," Gavrilov shrugged. "I stood for truth." He sat down on Spider's bunk. Another symbol. He'd just taken the boss's spot, and no one dared to object. In this world, respect came from 2 things, strength and truth. And that night, Sergei had shown both. That night, the cell never really slept. The air hung thick like soup, a blend of sweat, cheap tobacco, rust, and fear baked into the concrete. Every snore, every cough, every whispered word bounced off the walls and came back twice as loud. The old man, they called him Pops Savely, shifted over to where I sat. He rolled himself a thin, yellowed cigarette from a little pouch of dry tobacco, lit it, and took a drag slow enough to make the ember crawl. "Name Savely," he said, passing it to me. "Been running the circuit since '49. Haven't seen daylight longer than a month at a time." I took the smoke, nodded. "Sergei Gavrilov." He squinted. "Figured you weren't new to this. You move like someone who's been trained, not like these corner punks. You fought before?" I looked at the glow of the cigarette. "A while back. Different life. Army?" I didn't answer, but he read it anyway. "Afghanistan," he murmured and nodded slow. "Yeah. I can always tell." He leaned closer. "Listen, kid. This ain't no brotherhood out here. This place, this yard. They call it Red Zone, but it runs dark as hell. Warden's a psycho, name's Colonel Ryabov. He runs it like a damn war camp. But the Khans got their own commander, the Greek. Old school. Keeps a code alive, barely. Spider you dropped today worked under him, skimming off everything he could. So, don't think you're done. The Greek will call a council. They'll judge you for touching one of his men." "I'll answer," I said. "I didn't pick that fight, but I won't crawl either." Pop smiled, showing 2 gold teeth. "Good. You bend once in here, they'll have you bent for life." He drew another breath, eyes fogging with memory. "My first stretch, 47, hunger years. My baby sister was dying. I stole a sack of grain from the collective farm. 10 years they gave me, enemy of the people. In the camp they said, pick your side, the guards or the thieves. I chose the thieves. They taught me the code, how to live by honor when the whole damn world forgets what that means. 40 years later, here I am. This barrack's my home, this crew's my family." He fell silent for a moment, staring at nothing. His eyes held 40 years of bars, frost, and graves. No romance in them, just exhaustion. "There's a war in here, son," he whispered. "Old school against the new wave. The new ones, we call them oranges, buy their crowns with money. No soul, no code, just cash and fear. Greek tries to keep the peace, but the oranges work with the warden. They buy the guards, they make deals. You showed strength today, so they'll notice. Friends and enemies both. Keep your eyes open." He stubbed out the cigarette, leaving a tiny circle of ash on the concrete. I leaned back on the bunk, staring at the barred window. Beyond it was a sky so black it felt solid. 15 years, 5,475 days. The first test was done. 1,000 more were coming, each with its own price. Your blood, your breath, or your name. I remembered what the investigator told me at the last interrogation. You think you're strong, Gavrilov? The system will grind you up and spit you out. We'd see about that, because the war wasn't over. It was just starting. My war. I lay down on the hard bunk, hands under my head, eyes wide open. Faces floated before me, the ones I'd left outside, and the ones I'd sent under the dirt. That's the tab I carried now. 15 years of payments, one night at a time. Night in a cell isn't quiet, it hums. Hundreds of bodies breathing in sync, a chorus of coughing, muttering, grinding teeth. The smell of fear baked into the walls. Across the cell, a man everyone called Snake lay on the top bunk, eyes on the ceiling blackened by years of smoke. He couldn't sleep either, his muscles still buzzed from the intake fight. But it wasn't pain that kept him awake, it was waiting. Yakut, the yard boss, hadn't said much after the brawl, just, live for now. But that, for now, hung in the air like a blade. In this god-forsaken prison, somewhere in the frozen woods of Oregon, every word weighed a ton. Every silence, too. Snake knew they were watching him. Every glance, every gesture, every word thrown his way was part of the exam. Pass, you breathe. Fail, you disappear. He shut his eyes, and the memories came flooding back. The gates slamming, the dogs barking, guards yelling, the warden leafing through his file like yesterday's paper. Andrei Solovyov, aka Snake, second-degree murder with extreme cruelty, 20 years. The major's bulldog face twisted in disgust. Doesn't look like a killer, we'll see. Nobody leaves here untouched. Snake said nothing. You never talk to the brass, ever. Words get you caged deeper. The next morning, when the line of gray-suited inmates marched toward the factory zone, a mountain of a man named Valet grabbed Snake by the shoulder. Yakut's waiting. Dry room? The dry room was the gang's unofficial HQ inside the carpentry shop. Hot from the steam pipes, soaked in the smell of wood and sweat. Guards rarely stepped in, too risky. That was black territory. Inside sat Yakut, Valet, and two others. One, a wiry old lifer covered head to toe in faded ink, eyes so pale they looked white. The other, young, hungry, tattooed in fresh color, name Lucky. A rising star among the thugs. Yakut sat on an upside-down crate, cigarette in hand, smoke curling upward. Sit, he said softly. His voice was low, calm, the kind that made even maniacs freeze. Snake sat, said nothing, waited. You look seasoned, Yakut said. Been around the block, juvie, then county, then this, right? Snake gave a small nod. Yakut tapped ash onto the floor. Then you know how it goes. You got in for a reason. What was it? This wasn't curiosity. It was another test. You tell too little. They think you're lying. Too much. They think you're bragging. You balance the blade. Took care of a businessman, Snake said flatly. He cheated the crew, stole from the pool. We found him. Yakut's eyes narrowed, approving. Not killed, took care of. Not for money, for justice. The right words. You work alone? With a partner, he got out, I covered him. Yakut crushed the cigarette under his boot. Good. You don't snitch. Now listen. He leaned forward. Nobody knows you here. Trust is earned, with deeds. He let the silence stretch. The old man picked his teeth with a splinter. Lucky smirked like a hyena. There's a rat in third block, Yakut said finally. Name's Pete Hawkins, officially a store clerk, unofficially, warden snitch. He rats on everyone. Last week, 2 kids got thrown in the hole because of him. One of them didn't come back. Yakut's eyes glinted. That bastard's drunk on power. Warden shields him. We can't kill him. That'd bring a storm. We break him. He needs to walk the yard alive so everybody knows what happens to rats. Snake's gut went cold. It was a command, not a request. What exactly? He asked quietly. Lucky snorted. Yakut nodded. Right question. Break his hands. Both. He'll never write another report. The room fell silent except for the pipes humming. Break the hands of the warden's snitch. That meant the whole. At best. Another 20 years on top. At worst. Do it, and you're one of us, Yakut said. Refuse. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Snake understood. Refuse. You're nothing. A janitor, a ghost, or a corpse in the factory. When? Snake asked. That made Lucky stop smiling. Valet nodded once. End of the week, Yakut said. 4 days. Tools. We'll get you what you need. Do it clean. No witnesses. Snake stood. I get it. He walked back through the factory, past the screeching saws and hammering machines. Cold air bit his face. He felt nothing, no fear, no anger. Just clarity. In this place, you either climb over bodies or get buried under them. There's no third road. For the next 2 days, I moved like a ghost. Worked my shift at the wood shop. Ate my slop in the chow hall. Listened to the usual yard gossip. Who got a shiv? Who got a visit? Who didn't wake up this morning? But I wasn't living. I was watching everything. I memorized guard routes, shift changes, the snitch's habits, Pete Hawkins, a rat dressed as a clerk, 40-something, greasy hair, thick glasses, a little gut from too much commissary food. He always walked fast, like he had somewhere important to be. He didn't work in the shop. He floated between offices, the kitchen, the supply sheds, always in motion, always looking over his shoulder like he knew one day someone would come. Every evening, about half an hour before lights out, he'd sneak off to the small bathhouse near the isolation block, the one only guards and trustees used. 1 light bulb, 1 exit, no witnesses. Perfect. By the 3rd night, I was ready. After count, I told my cellmate I was going to the John. Instead, I slid out the side door and vanished into the shadows behind the barracks. Under my coat was a piece of rebar, about 16 inches, one end wrapped in tape. Cold metal in my hand, heartbeat steady as a drum. I didn't think about consequences. You can't in a place like this. You just focus on the task. I crouched behind a pile of coal slag near the bathhouse. The air was sharp enough to cut skin. Every breath turned to steam. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed. Shift change. The watchtower light swept across the yard. White, blinding, then gone. Finally, the door creaked open. Steam poured out. Pete stepped outside, wearing nothing but an undershirt and boxers, towel over his shoulders, humming to himself. He shivered, started walking back toward the living quarters, quick little steps on the frozen ground. I waited until he passed me. "Hey, Pete," I said quietly. He froze, turned. In the dull glow of the lamp, his eyes went wide. He recognized me, and he knew exactly why I was there. "Hey, man, what's this?" His voice cracked. "Listen, we can talk, okay? We can..." I stepped closer. No talking. He tried to run, but I was faster. The first swing caught him across the legs. He screamed and went down, face first in the dirt. "For the kids you sent to the hole," I said. He tried to crawl away, whimpering, babbling something about his kids, his wife. I grabbed his wrist. "This hand," I said, "writes lies." The rebar came down. Crack. His scream tore through the night like a siren. I clamped a hand over his mouth. "You want to live? Shut up." He sobbed, shaking, blood running down his arm. I grabbed the other wrist. "This one's for the one who didn't make it out." Crack. Bones broke like dry branches. He collapsed, twitching, both hands mangled, face buried in the dirt. I stood over him, breathing hard. "Now, live with that," I muttered. Then I threw the rebar into the snow and melted back into the dark. 10 minutes later, the sirens howled again. Searchlights sliced through the yard, guards shouted, dogs barked, keys rattled. By the time they stormed our barrack, I was already lying on my bunk, eyes half open, breathing steady. The door burst open. Boots, flashlights, rifles. "Up! Everybody up!" We lined against the wall. One by one, they pulled guys out, cuffed them, dragged them away. When it was my turn, I didn't resist. They walked me to the admin wing, the warden's office glowing like a furnace. Major Ryabov sat behind the desk, red-faced, eyes bloodshot. "So," he growled, "you take evening walks now, Solovyov?" "No, sir," I said flatly. "After count, I was in the dorm. You can ask around." He spat on the floor. "Ask? I know it was you. My gut says so. You think your new friends will protect you? They'll sell you for a pack of smokes." He stood up, leaned close. His breath reeked of booze. "I'll bury you in solitary, boy. You'll cough blood before you talk." I looked him dead in the eyes. Then you'd better dig deep, Warden. He froze for half a second, not expecting that. Then he yelled, 15 days in the hole, violation of discipline. 2 guards twisted my arms behind my back, cuffed me, and hauled me down the corridor. The door of the isolation cell slammed shut like a coffin lid. No window, no light. Just a concrete box, barely big enough to stand in. The smell of bleach and human waste clawed at my throat. Water dripped from the ceiling. The floor was ice. 15 days, 300 grams of bread, 1 cup of boiling water a day. But you know what? I didn't feel beaten. I felt steady. For the first time since I came in, I knew exactly where I stood. I'd paid the price, and I'd been accepted. I sat down on the freezing floor, leaned back against the wet wall, and closed my eyes. Ahead of me, 15 days of hell. After that, a new life inside this hell. The life of a man with a name, Snake. The man who broke the rat's hands, the man who passed the test. By the time they pulled me out, the yard had already changed. People looked at me different. Some nodded with respect. Others stayed clear. That's how you know you've earned a place, when half the people fear you and the other half trust you to do what needs doing. That night, I sat in the corner of the barrack. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and the bitter smell of coffee made from melted caramels. The old-timers sat around a cracked metal mug of black brew, prison coffee, strong enough to strip paint. That's where I met the old man again, Pops, and 2 others, one they called Tooth, young, tattooed, hungry for blood, and the artist, quiet, sharp-eyed, his hands stained with ink. The mug went around the circle, 2 sips each. Ritual, no talking till it came back to Pops. Then Pops spoke, his voice rough as sandpaper. You ever heard of the Whitebird back in '62? Everyone went still. Even Tooth stopped smirking. That was the year they tried to break us, Pops said. Some colonel thought he'd educate thieves, lined us all up, called in a man named Diamond Vass, said, this one's a thief in law. Watch him pick up a hammer and work for the state. He paused. His smoke curled into the yellow light. Vass looked that colonel dead in the eyes, walked right up, and shoved a sharpened spoon in his throat. Didn't say a word. Guards beat him to death on stage, but none of us ever broke after that. Silence. That's what code means, Pops said. There's things worse than dying. Losing your honor's one of them. He passed the mug to Tooth. Tooth laughed softly. Old times, Pops, cute stories, but out there, money talks. You got cash, you got power, honors for old men. Me, I live by the jungle rule, kill or be killed. Pops squinted, said nothing. Tooth grinned wider. I used to run the east side of Detroit. 80s were wild, man. Dealers, muscleheads, boxers, all fighting for turf. We went in strapped, TTs, sawed-offs, the works. They came at us with bats. We turned the field red. 15 years later, I'm here. No regrets. Only thing I regret is not shanking the snitch that sold us out. He took a long gulp of the bitter brew. Your honor, Pops, don't buy food in the yard. Cash does. Pops exhaled through his nose. Maybe. But even in the jungle, animals got rules. We're still men, son. That shut everyone up. The artist finally looked up. You want a story? He said quietly. Everyone turned toward him. Because in prison, when a quiet man speaks, you listen. The artist sat there quiet, hands wrapped around the dented mug, eyes half closed, like he was listening to something far away. His fingers were stained the color of old ink, the kind that never washes out. When he spoke, his voice wasn't loud, but the whole barrack leaned in anyway. I'm no fighter, he said. Never was. On the street, I made a living with my hands. Papers, signatures, letters that walked through any gate. In here, they kept me around for the same reason. Head and hands. He glanced at Tooth, then at Pops. But lately the air's been different, like storm weather. 2 weeks now it's been humming. He wasn't wrong. You could feel it in the walls, a buzz that made even the quiet ones flinch at every cough. The reason's got a name, Artist went on. More than one. A crew from the Caucasus. 12 of them. Young, hard, running as a pack. Their lead dog calls himself Givey. Short hair, wrestler's ears, stare like a drill. They didn't walk into the yard. They crashed through it. They laughed at the code, called it bedtime stories for old thieves. For them, there was only one rule: raw power. Our shot caller, folks called him Boss, real name Stephen Andrew, watched without blinking. He was pushing 60-40 of those behind wire. A face like cracked leather, eyes washed of color, but still sharp. He liked to settle things by talk, sit-downs, old school. But with this crew, talking was just noise before the punch. Artist was sitting on his bunk, pretending to fix a boot when it finally broke open. Chow Hall. The stupid kind of incident that cuts deepest. A kid named Shorty, thin, quick, eager to please, was carrying a tray, moving careful. One of Givvy's boys, a mountain of meat they called Godzilla, stuck a foot out. Tray flew, slop splashed the floor. The metal bowl rang out like a gunshot. Shorty froze, eyes wide. Givvy's boys laughed like hyenas. "Watch where you're going, puppy," Godzilla rumbled without even looking at him. Shorty's fists balled. He knew the code. "You let that slide, you're nobody." "You got the wrong map, big man," he said, voice steady. "You don't trip a man for sport." The laughter died. Godzilla stood, 2 heads taller, 3 times wider. "What did you say?" he asked softly. "Say it again." That's when Gray stepped in. Boss's right hand. Not loud, not quick. A man carved from old wood, blue with ink from neck to ankles. "Relax," Gray said. "Kid didn't start it. You tripped him. That's not how men act." Godzilla's lip curled. "And who made you preacher?" Givy rose from the table, laid a hand on Godzilla's shoulder. "Gray, step aside. We're handling it." "We're all handling it," Gray said. "When there's no order, everybody bleeds." Givy looked Shorty up and down like he was dirt on a shoe. "You call this one a man? In my hills, we don't even count his kind." That wasn't just an insult. That was a hammer dropped on the whole house. "Tonight," Gray said, "boiler room on the line. Boss will be there. We talk it out." Givy smirked. "We love to talk." The factory yard was a cathedral of rust and smoke. Black stacks punched the sky, coughing out clouds that tasted like pennies. Behind the coal piles was the place, far from guards, far from snitches. Our side was small, Boss on a crate, coat pulled tight, Gray at his shoulder, Artist hanging back, hands in his pockets, a couple of old wolves. Their side came 8 deep, tight as a fist. Speaking low in their language, Godzilla stripped off his coat to show a chest like a freezer door. "Say your piece, old man," Givy called to Boss. "We've got better things to do." Boss drew on his smoke, let the line burn, then pinched the ember out and pocketed the butt. "You don't litter in front of your own, not even ash." "No rush," he said. "We've all got time. You're new here, but you're breaking old rules. Why touch the kid? Why push men for nothing? That's not how we live. That's how clowns act." "Clowns?" Givy's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You tell us to sit quiet and slurp soup until the officers pat our heads? Your code is for weak stomachs. Times have changed. The strong take." "What's yours here?" Boss asked, voice flat. "Your bunk and your portion. Everything else is shared, and for shared things, we'll ask you straight." "You'll ask?" Givy laughed outright. "Look at you. You creak when you stand up. These grandpas and scribblers with you. You'll ask us?" He swept a hand at our crew. "We'll grind you into the dust behind these pipes." Artist felt the coil inside him pull tight. He watched Boss. The way the old man's eyes stayed soft, pitying even, like a father looking at a kid with a knife he doesn't understand. "There's an old rule," Boss said quietly. "If talk fails, iron decides. But iron has rules too. Your ox, Godzilla, got called for foul play. He pays 1-on-1, with Gray." Givy squinted at Gray, then shook his head. "He'll break your man in a minute. Not good enough." His eyes slid across our line and landed on the smallest shadow there. "Let's see your artist," he said. "They say his hands are gold. We'll test them." The yard went silent. Throwing a clerk at a butcher wasn't a match. It was a message, a public hanging. Refuse? You're a coward, a stain. Accept? You probably die. Artist felt the blood leave his face. He wasn't born for this. On the street he'd had maybe 2 fights, both sloppy, both quick. Here he kept his body alive with his brain. And now his brain was getting shoved into the grinder. He looked at Boss. The old man looked back. No order there, no mercy either. Just a question. What kind of man are you? And behind that question, a gift. Whatever you choose, it'll be yours. Artist slid his hands out of his pockets and let the piece of rebar drop back inside the coat. He took a single step forward. "Fine," he said, and surprised himself that his voice didn't shake. "I'll go." Gray started to object, but Boss touched his sleeve. "Don't let the man choose." Godzilla rolled his neck, vertebrae popping like knuckles, and grinned. "Come on, Picasso," he growled. "I'll paint you on the floor." "No toys," Boss said, pushing himself to his feet. "To first blood or till one can't stand. No hitting a man who's down." Givy nodded, lips tight. His boys pulled back to make a ring. Ours did the same. Artist shrugged off his coat. Wind knifed through his thin shirt. He felt small, ridiculous, a sparrow in front of a bulldog. Godzilla didn't wait. He charged like a linebacker, pure mass and rage. Some part of Artist he barely remembered woke up then. A set of old drills from a half-forgotten training hall. A few hours of army hand-to-hand that he'd always thought were a joke. Don't meet weight with weight. Let it fly past. He stepped not back, but across. A quick drop of the shoulder. A slip that made the brute thunder by with nothing to hit. Godzilla stumbled, skidded, turned red with surprise. Artist clipped him at the base of the neck with a short shot. Not big, not heavy, but sharp. Godzilla roared more from insult than pain. Again the bull came, fists like sledgehammers, air hissing. Artist ducked one, rolled off another, felt a third skip across his ribs. White heat lanced his side and stole his breath. He wouldn't last. Not dancing, he needed a nail to drive. One good nail. The jaw on a man like this is a rock. The liver's buried too deep under that armor. The head's a tree trunk. But joints. Joints are God's equalizers. When Godzilla lumbered in a third time, Artist slid aside and stomped down and in. Heel to kneecap. Not pretty, just physics. The sound was a dry crack that turned stomachs. Godzilla screamed, a high animal sound, and dropped to one knee, face twisting open. Artist stood over him, chest on fire, ears ringing. If he wanted, he could end it right then. One kick to the temple. It would have been easy. He remembered Boss's voice. No hitting a man who's down. So he didn't. "Enough," Boss said. "He's not on his feet. It's over." Givy's pack surged forward to grab their wounded bull. Givy stared at Artist like he wanted to swallow him whole. He hadn't just lost a fight. He'd lost his story. Raw power wasn't king here. Craft and rule had cut it down. "This isn't done," Givy hissed at Artist. "I'll dig you out of the earth." "Start by fixing your man's mess," Gray snapped, stepping in. "Your ox broke the code. You pay. Apologies to the kid. No more pushing men for sport." Givy's jaw ticked. His crew looked at him, half afraid, half hungry. One wrong move, and the yard would drown in bodies. He swallowed it. "We're done here," he said to his men, and turned away. When they vanished behind the coal stacks, Boss walked up to Artist and set a hand on his shoulder. The hand was dry and light, but it steadied like a post. "Hurts?" he asked. "Breathing does," Artist managed. "But I'll live." "Good," Boss said. "You didn't flinch. More important, you didn't spit on the rule when you could have. You stood for something bigger than your skin. That's the only way any of us keeps a name in here." He turned to Gray. "Get him to the dorm, find a sawbones, 2 ribs, maybe more, and make sure nobody creeps up on him in the dark. Jackals love the quiet." Gray hooked an arm under Artist and walked him out slow, step by step, through the cinder dust and into the cold light. That night, the barrack breathed like a sleeping animal, low, ragged, human. The air tasted of wet socks and stale smoke. In the far bunk, somebody cried in his sleep. Maybe he dreamed of home, maybe of the one wrong step that put iron between him and the sun. 3 stories sat in that stink like stones in a pocket. The first was Pops, the old thief who had watched generations come and rot. He didn't brag, he didn't threaten. He just held a line that had been written long before any of us were born. A line he knew he would die standing on. He believed honor was worth a life. He'd proved it enough times that nobody argued when he said the word. The second was Tooth, young and hungry, a child of the 80s chaos, a man who had learned that money beats truth and bullets write law. He respected nothing he couldn't spend. He was the future coming for us like a train, loud, fast, blind. The third was Gray, a soldier who had carried a war home inside his bones. He'd done a thing the law calls murder, and his own heart calls justice. Then the law locked him in a world where he had to live by rules that weren't his. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't want it. He just wanted to survive without turning into the kind of animal that made him pick up the knife in the first place. And then there was Artist, the clerk who fought once and won, not because he was meaner, but because he listened to the only rules that still made sense. Don't push the weak for fun. Don't spit on your own word. Don't hit a man when he's already down. Outside, the wind shoved the factory stacks till they moaned. Inside, the barracks settled back into its nightly hum. But the hum was different now. Lower, calmer, word travels fast in a prison. By dawn, everyone knew. The code still had teeth. I lay on my bunk and counted the breaths between coughs. 15 years, 5,475 days. You don't beat that by force. You beat it by rhythm. Wake, work, watch, hold your line, pay your debts. If you're lucky, you pay with bruises and time. If you're not, you pay with pieces of your soul. The investigator's words came back like a bad taste. You think you're strong, the system will grind you up and spit you out. Maybe. But steel can't chew what it can't catch. And it can't catch a man who knows exactly where he stands. In here, you get stripped to bone. No money, no suit, no story you told about yourself. Just your choices and the weight of them. Pick up what's dirty to make someone smile. And you'll wear that dirt until you die. Say no. And you might bleed, but the blood will at least be yours. I thought about Pete Hawkins and the way his hands curled when the bones gave. I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel bad either. I felt like a man who'd hammered a crooked nail straight. He'd write again someday maybe. People heal in strange ways. But I doubted he'd ever pick up a pen without remembering the snow, the dark, and the sound a life makes when it changes direction. I thought about Godzilla too, the way a joint will humble even a giant. A body is a body. A rule is a rule. Both can snap if you lean wrong. Somewhere between the bunks, Pops coughed, then whispered something to no one. A prayer, maybe, or a name. Tooth rolled over and muttered in his sleep. Gray's breath stayed slow, like a machine. Artist sighed once and went quiet. I closed my eyes and let the hum carry me a little. Not sleep, not yet, but close enough to see the edge of it. People think prison is all fights and screams. It is sometimes, but mostly it's waiting. Waiting for count, for chow, for mail. For the moment, somebody tests your fence and you have to decide, again, what kind of man you are. Tomorrow they'd test it again. Givey wasn't done. Men like him never are. He'd try a knife in the dark or a favor with a price. He'd smile when he said hello, then measure my back with his eyes. That's all right. I wasn't done either. The war doesn't end. You don't win. You just keep your name. That's the whole game. I folded my hands behind my head and stared into the dark until the dark stared back. Somewhere outside, a dog barked at nothing. Somewhere inside, a man whispered the word home and didn't know he'd said it aloud. 15 years. I'd passed the first test. Not because I was the strongest, because I chose a side and stayed on it when it hurt. That's prison. That's life. Same thing, different fences. The bolt screamed somewhere down the tier. A door slammed. Footsteps faded. The hum rolled over it and kept going. I breathed with it, slow, steady. And for the first time since the door swallowed me, I felt it under my feet. Not safety, not hope. Something smaller and harder. Ground.